I hear some more beeps coming in, but I'm going to start introducing our last speaker of the day, our last keynote speaker of the day. She flew in from overseas just to speak to you guys today, so I hope you're excited. It's Mariana Cabugueira. She's an architect and urban designer from Portugal, having worked over 5 years as a senior architectural designer at Zaha Hadid Architects, and currently working as the director of architecture for the metaverse company Wilder World. Mariana has tutored digital design and modeling at the Architectural Association Design Research Laboratory in London, the Live Academy in Dubai, Futurely, and currently holds her own studio with PA Academy. Graduated from the School of Architecture in Lisbon and the Politecnico di Milano, she moved to London to explore design and technology through a postgraduate course, Design Research Laboratory, DRL, at the Architectural Association School. Her research interests gravitate around parametric design, generative design, digital design, and robotic fabrication. Her final project composes a cluster of towers, radically different but biologically similar, in the center of London. Mariana joined Zaha Hadid Architects after graduating from the AA school in 2017. She was part of the competition cluster for 5 years and the designer of winning projects such as the Navi Mumbai Airport, the Western Sydney Airport, the Exhibition Center Beijing, and the competition and completion of Tower C in Shenzhen. Currently, Mariana is designing the metaverse with Wilder World. She holds a title of the Architect Director of the Meta Future Era. Give it a round of applause for Mariana Cabugueira.
Thank you. Is this on? Hi, everyone. It's really great to see you all. I'd like to start off by thanking the Telo team, Jay, DK, of course, ArchiPro, for finishing with me and ending the keynote as a keynote speaker today. So let's start with introductions. My name is Mariana Cabugueira. Like the introduction said, I am an architect from Portugal. 5 months ago, I resigned from one of the biggest architectural practices in the world. I worked for this practice, Zaha Hadid Architects, for 5 years as a senior architect until I decided to accept the challenge of being the director of an architecture department for a metaverse company, American, called Wilder World. Exactly like you, I was actually a skeptic. More than a skeptic, I was ignorant. I didn't know what metaverse was. And why did I decide to take such an unconventional job? Because I saw the opportunity for architects, but more than that, I saw responsibility of architects to create what I consider to be the next generation of space. And that's how we've been taught to create, and I think that's what the responsibility for metaverse should be, is with architects. So that's why I resigned. I joined as the director of architecture. I'm doing architecture from scratch. And that's the reason why I'm here in this talk, is to share with you the conclusions I've taken for architects. What is the metaverse for us? What is the metaverse for creators? What are the opportunities? What is the responsibility? And that's for that reason that my talk is called The Architect's Transition to the Metaverse. So let's disclose this big taboo. Okay, usually on all my talks I start with a bit of my background. So I always go through my student years, what kind of projects I did, what were my main interests, how did I land at Zaha, how were my years at Zaha. And then I move to the second part, which is a very boring part, but I think it's really important for us to be connoisseurs of what does metaverse mean, what is Web3, what is the blockchain, and that's going to be the boring part. But then I'll take you very fast to how can you be part of it, passively, extremely actively, you can have both. And third part, I'm going to talk about Wilder World. So what is this company, this American company? And then I'll finish with academia. I'm also a tutor and a teacher for 6 years. And recently, I'm actually teaching architecture students to be part of meta spaces, so cyber urban spaces. So starting from the beginning, I had very long education years. I don't recommend how long it was. I don't think it's a recipe for success. But I actually studied for 8 years. I studied in Portugal. I studied in Lisbon. And the reason why I studied for so long was I was in a very conventional university, and I was not a very conventional student. And it took me a long time to trust in my lack of conventionality and to move from university to university until I found exactly the tools and the skills that I needed for the kind of design that I believed in. So I moved to Milano, to Italy. And after that, I moved to London for a very important course, post-graduation course called Design Research Laboratory. So in Lisbon, like I said, I was, for some reason, extremely plastic, not for the sake of being plastic. I don't believe in that. I do believe that form has a responsibility in context, and it also has a dialogue with the context. So I do believe in form, firmly in form. And I was in a school that was against form, against aesthetics, even against the word aesthetics. In Lisbon. It was a very modern, when I say modern, I mean Le Corbusier 60s, 70s. So I kind of had a very hard time to fit in. I was considered a student that was in my master's. I did a very long master thesis, almost like a PhD. One of the judge actually wanted to pass me as a genius title. The other one wanted to fail me, and he didn't want me to be an architect at all. He said that I would be a very mean architect to the world. Obviously, when you're very young, you get very stuck to the bad sizes, so I was kind of like low in confidence. When I finished my master's, this is the scenario that you have in Portugal when you finish, probably the same as New Zealand, I'm not sure. But when you finish, you have an unpaid internship in front of you. Architecture in Portugal is still very much in the 60s and 70s. It's very boxy, nothing against boxes. I believe that organics and fluid spaces fit humanity better. Obviously, that comes with technology, and that means skills, and that means knowledge. So my country didn't have any of those, so they were still pretty much on the boxes. And they were doing refurbishments, which is bringing the past to the present, which I'm almost 100% against. So I moved countries. I moved to the UK on my own, and I moved to conclude and to start a very important post-graduation course called Design Research Laboratory in a school where Zaha Hadid was a student before, Steven All was a student, Kenneth Frampton was a student, Patrick Schumacher was teaching this studio. And basically, this studio was everything that my university was not teaching, right? It was teaching tools, it was teaching design, it was teaching research of design through robotic fabrication, through, in this case, topology optimization, through Grasshopper, through Maya, through Rhino, and I was doing AutoCAD before I joined this. I was doing 2D. So I had 1 year and a half to learn all of these softwares, all of these skills, and in 1 year and a half, I worked with Patrick Schumacher in the studio, and I finished my second master's in architecture, and right now with the exact skills that I needed to do the exact designs that I believed in. After that, I was recommended by Patrick to join the Zaha Hadid Architects. I joined with a very interesting title called Architectural Designer. So an architect with actually 2 masters in architecture, but I was designing the buildings. And that's a kind of title that we are not very used to. But that's exactly what I was doing. I joined a cluster, so a department, a very important department called Zaha Cluster. And this department is basically responsible for designing all of the mega and the well-known buildings of the office. Because as you can imagine, these kind of offices, very big ones, 500 people, they don't do only this kind of design, right? There's a lot of buildings happening that are more conventional. I call them the bread and butter of the office, right? You don't see them, I don't see them. They are basically not published, and they have a bit less design. This cluster in specific is all about design, breaking design boundaries, and most important, the skills for creating this kind of design. From all the 5 years that I did at Zaha, I did mostly competitions. And I did, I think, 3 competitions that I'm extremely proud of. So the first one was Navi Mumbai Airport. I joined, and I was actually very young. I was 27. And I did one of the most iconic moments of this airport. We won the competition. I worked on it for completion for almost 2 years. But then our client got involved on some financial schemes, and we lost the project, and it's kind of a lost baby for me. I also worked on Sydney Airport, which was a very important competition that the office won as well. It'll be finished in 2025. And I was one of the main responsibles for the design of the ceiling, which is basically the most important feature of this project. And I also was part of the Beijing Exhibition Center, which is also going to be built by 2025. The end of my Zaha years, actually I was asked to be part of this competition 2 years before I left Zaha. It's called Tower C, it's for Shenzhen. It's a competition that we won. It's a twin tower. It was competing against SOM, UN Studio, Foster's, the whole circus. And it was a big competition. And I decided to kind of trick the brief. That was a twin tower, and I decided to make these towers hug as a one tower only, and that would probably make a difference in the competition from Zaha entry. And then my project leader created this amazing arm that is embracing this central park. The team grew a lot. We started, we were 3. We finished, we were 20. And we won the competition. And when we won, I was invited to stay on the project for completion. And when I decided to stay, I knew that was my last competition at Zaha, and my time had ended. So I stayed on the tower for another 1.5 years for completion. It will be finished by 2026. And now it's actually delivered to Beijing office, and they are finishing the tower. So like I said, it's a twin tower. The base of the tower is a public base. It's a public auditorium with all of these steps and all of these stores. And then as it goes up, it becomes a hotel, a boutique hotel, an office, and it finishes with a huge sky bar and 5-star restaurant. Okay, there's one very important thing about working at Zaha that I always disclose this to my students, and I think it's important if I tell you now. There's a tool that is responsible for Zaha DNA, and it's actually software. It's a software that was not meant for architects. We don't learn it at schools. I learned it during the DRL, and it's called Autodesk Maya. So this software has an amazing ability to create curves and to create minimal surfaces. And it has an algorithm that runs inside that no other software has. So when you join Zaha Hadid, you need to be proficient at this software. And it's when I realized this, and when I joined Zaha, I was terrible at the software, absolutely awful. I decided to sprint my way in and to do Maya and run this software every day after work, every weekend. I pushed for this software like no other software. I was just doing this. I was just running Maya. So I'm creating 1,000 of different projects on the side. They were just digital tests to test my skills, to improve, and to become, I think I became one of the best in the end, definitely one of the fastest. But that was also when I realized that it was time to teach this software to students. And I went back to the DRL, and I decided, okay, I'm going to teach you this, not just because the office will benefit from students who know how to run this tool, but you'll get a higher chance to be hired at this office. So I started teaching Maya at the DRL, and then I decided to teach Maya digitally over the weekends to a mega audience over Saturdays and Sundays for 2 years, the last 2 years. And that's when I started creating a huge digital portfolio. And when I mean digital portfolio, I meant I had a huge number of projects that were only digital projects. They had no future, they had no end, they were just 3Ds that were like lying around in my computer. And my life was kind of this duality between working for real life, for Tower C, and working for digital spaces for my students, and very important, for my social media. So this is when, let's say, chronologically, this is 2.5 years ago. And this is when all this Web3 talk started, all the NFTs started, all the cryptos started. It's not like they started 2 years ago, but we started listening about it. And Web3 and also blockchain. So I think it's very obvious. We all know that in the last 2 days, we saw a very rapid rise of the digital economy, right? I think this is basic. We all know that. Digital economy is taking over the real economy. And why am I saying economy? Because we are actually creating a new economy called the blockchain. And blockchain and digital economy is happening in the WWW, World Wide Web 3. What is Web 3? And I know like the boring part is starting, but please listen to this. Web 3 is starting, it's been developed for the last 10 years. It will become mainstream for the next 5. Right now we are living Web 2. What is Web 2? Usually there's a very good comparison with, oops, how do I go back? There's a very important comparison with Web 2 and 2D. Web 2 is our social platforms, our screens, our scrolls. That's 2D, right? Before we have Web 1, I think we all remember Web 1, Yahoo, Google, all of our search engines. And from Web 2, we are creating Web 3. Web 3 is, the most important part of Web 3 is a decentralized internet, World Wide Web. And what does it mean, decentralized? It does not have anyone who owns your data, like Facebook owns your data, Instagram owns your data. On Web3, there's a direct connection between traders, between buyer and seller. There's no bank in the middle, there is no one taking their commission, there's no third parties, money goes directly, exactly like crypto, from me, who's selling, and from the buyer. No one in the middle. And that's Web3, and it's been developed for 10 years. It will go mainstream, hopefully in 5. And just out of curiosity, this transaction between seller and buyer is called smart contracts on Web3. And all of this economy is called blockchain. Okay, so this is the end of all the weird names. What are the digital assets? This buyer and seller, they are selling and buying something. It's called a digital asset. Digital assets are called NFTs, non-fungible token. That's the meaning of digital assets, super clean and super clear. NFTs do not have to be, like we all know, like the Bored Ape or a piece of art or a GIF or a movie. It doesn't have to be necessarily artistic. Digital assets are exactly like I said. It's something that doesn't have a physical footprint. It's just digital. It's happening between computer to computer, seller to buyer, and that's the meaning of NFTs. So what is the metaverse? Metaverse is literally the scenario where all of this is happening. So metaverse, there's not only one. There can be multiple. It's the physical, it's the literally the virtual environment where you have Web3, blockchain, tokens, and it's selling NFTs. So it's like a little world, as we call it. It's like a second fabric to the society. It doesn't replace society. It's not the same as our real space. It's a complement of both. So a very important fact about metaverse, it's being rendered in real time. Okay, so for example, we know that in games it's rendered in real time, but there's a very specific path that is being rendered. On metaverse, there's no specific path. It's exactly like our real life environment, but it's being rendered, just like our render engines, but it's being rendered on multiple servers. So that's the meaning of the metaverse. There's one important thing that I need to say about metaverse. Unfortunately, metaverse has like a bitter taste, right? For you and for me as well, because it's connected to Meta. And I think we all lost kind of trust with this company. So they were very smart to grab the name and to become Meta. And they were very smart to be absolutely connected to this name. I do believe that the name will expire. And most likely in 100 years, they will look at us as the dinosaurs of metaverse. And they will say that we call it metaverse and we were these old people ancient. But the reality is, it's just a cyber urbanity. It will change names. It won't be called metaverse. And most likely, if Meta goes down, metaverse goes down as well on the market. But the concept of Web3 cyberspaces is staying and is being developed right now. Okay, so what does this mean to spaces, to actual urban spaces? We have two different kinds of metaverse. The one on the left more popular than the one on the right. So we have the metaverse that is being designed by graphic designers. So Web3 being designed by Web2 designers, exactly like our Web2 is designed by graphic designers. They are moving to Web3. And then we have the architects who said, oh, okay, wait, we have been doing spaces since the beginning of civilization. We should be the ones doing the next spaces, right? So we have architects who are jumping quickly. In this case, Liberland from 2022 from Zaha Hadid. The most known, unfortunately, meta spaces are Decentraland by Meta, Sandbox by Google. And just for you to have more or less an idea, right now metaverse is worth, the whole metaverse is worth 45 billion, and it's a market that in 2030 is going to be 680 billion. So it's a market that is going almost vertically up. So what do they do in Decentraland, and what's the problem about these kind of platforms, with all respect to the designers? It's being designed by graphic designers who design user experience and customer experience. The art direction is based on game, in this case on Minecraft, and what I think that is the worst thing that anyone can do in urban scenarios, users can design their own houses. And that's one of the reasons why these cities are empty and they are monstrosities, because users design their own houses. As architects, we know what happens to urban scenarios that are designed by people, right? We don't even like when they touch the balconies. So imagine someone designing the houses next to other, next to another, next to another. And obviously, they are not architects, so they don't understand this concept. This was something that I presented at Wilder, so they could understand what it means by users creating. And another very important aspect, as you can tell, it's extremely cartoonish. So they are not going for high res. It still looks like a game, and it's actually, in some of the cases, on purpose. They want it to look cartoonish, so it's not looking like real life, and it doesn't encourage escapism. So people are not changing worlds, which is kind of debatable, but at the same time, it does make architecture look like this. So why does this matter to us? How can we be part of it? Passively, actively. We don't need to be on a metaverse. We don't need to know anything about the metaverse, but we can be passive to it as well and get the opportunity of it, and not to just hand on a silver platter this opportunity to graphic designers. So how can architects be part of it? I'm going to say like 5 different ways. So the first one is the very obvious one, right? You can just design your 3D, your office 3D, and then sell it. Basic. We all have 1,000 of 3Ds. We sell these, someone uploads to an open source metaverse, or we upload. Second one, I think it's the best strategy for anyone who has an office, is to propose your clients the digital experiment of the spaces. So you're not just doing a construction, you're giving them the experience of the space before. And I think that's a very smart strategy that Zara is, for example, using. Third one is actually the most common one, is the Twin City. We have this a lot in BIM. Twin cities is basically a real life with real-time data. For example, you can foresee all the climate changes, accelerate. So Twin cities is very common in BIM already. And then you have the most passive, which we all know. You just need a VR set, augmented reality, and you give it to your clients. I think most of us are already very used to this. And then you have the most active one, which is building the metaverse inside of a metaverse company, and that's what I do. So like I said, first one, it's the one that your office creates a piece of real estate, designs a 3D, hands to a client, hands to an open source. For example, this company is very famous, called Voxel Architects, and they do exactly this. So they develop their own 3Ds, they upload it on a platform. For example, this platform, I actually got a screenshot of a couple of plots that are being sold in Auckland. There are a lot of them that are already sold out. And they're basically digital sites, okay? It's not like you're going to sleep here, you're not going to eat here, you're not going to go to the toilet here. This is literally a digital asset on the market that is going from 47 billion to 600 billion. It's an investment with a digital footprint. And then at the same time, if you want to be extremely involved, beside doing your 3D and selling the 3D, you create your own space. You actually upload it. You are the game development responsible. For example, the Spaces is a very important pioneer in this. So you can see that it's starting. Actually, everything that I'm telling you, it's actually starting, which is great that you're listening now. So Spaces is creating multiple metaverse spaces for exhibition, for social events, and they are the ones responsible for the game development. And then you have the big offices, like big BR Kangos. They have a whole metaverse department responsible for studying typology. And this is exactly where architects come and graphic designers don't understand. We know that our typologies are the way they are because of function. So if we change function, we change design. No graphic designer understands this. And this is fundamental. And that's why architects need to get involved, because typology changes when the function changes. And this is what Big is doing. So they are questioning, well, how do you see a museum? How do you watch a game? How is a stadium now? They also have a project with, for example, vice versa. They did their headquarters, and they uploaded on Decentraland, so the bad guys. And then you have the strategy that I think that will become mainstream, and I can tell you from practice, from experience, that you have a lot of clients asking for this, which is, and they think it's so easy. But they commission you a project, and then they ask you, can you upload this on the metaverse before? And this is extremely common. And it's not that easy, but it's something like Zara started doing, I think it was June 2022, with the Prime Minister of Czech Republic. They commissioned a very big master plan called Liberland that will be built in the next 30 years. But before that, this is being uploaded by Metaverse on Metaverse. So everyone here will get to experience Liberland before it gets built, which is obviously a great strategy for marketing for a client. And obviously, it starts the funds way earlier than waiting for 30 years of construction. Zara saw this opportunity for master plans. Zara did, architects. And in that case, and because of that, they started taking all of their master plans and proposing them as metaverse environment. For example, this is a very known project called Unicorn Island, and it's in China, in the Unicorn Island. And there's only one building that is built right now. It's a project with, I think, 3 or 4 years. And when they saw that there's a way to experience this master plan digitally, they proposed the client a new fund, a new contract, and building the whole Unicorn Island digitally on a metaverse or on a cyber environment. It's also great to start a lot of other studies, for example, agent-based studies. You can test, simulate with real-time data the distance between one point and the other one, what is the fastest route, how can you design the fastest route. You can create heat maps, so everything means that you're working with real-time data, real-time rendering, and simulations with the actual data of reality, which is very important for design making. Funny enough, about Twin Towers, about Twin Cities, one of the most interesting and one of the biggest examples of Twin Cities is actually from New Zealand. It's from a company called Build Media Group. And they are basically a company that they do animations, they do renders for just like any rendering company for projects, for offices. And it got to a point that they had so much data of the city of Wellington that they decided to upload this in what is going to be one of the most important metaverse called Unreal. And they uploaded the whole city in Unreal. They are adding all of the real-time data from, it will foresee everything from climate change to the performance of your building according to next year's winter, 5-year summer, what's the impact of noise, what's the impact of pollution. So basically, there's a very big data of a twin city that is running in real time, and you put your project, most likely you have to pay for this, I think. You just upload your project, you render, it's render ready, so it's one of the most important examples of twin cities. Passively, I think we all know how metaverse works passively, right? We have VR. Obviously, this is very good for us, actually, for our work with augmented reality. This is a very good way to sell projects to clients. But I think we should see a bit past that and actually incorporate this VR or AR as a digital layer to our physical environment. For example, there's a project from Sue Fujimoto. It's that big installation in London. So it's literally, I went there and it was a huge chamber, empty, completely empty, with just people looking like crazy with their VR set. And they were looking around, and you had to ask someone, can you give me a VR? And then they gave you the headset, and you see this whole chandelier coming down. And this space that was completely empty is actually an extremely magical, with almost no boundaries on design kind of space. And this is a good way to incorporate on exhibitions, for example, aquariums. You have your animals going around you. So this is the passive way to do metaverse. And I think it's definitely the most mainstream one. And then comes the most active way to do, I'm not going to say metaverse again, but cyber environments. And that's what I do. and that's being part of a Web3 company that does metaverse and does not have only architects, in this case called Wilder World. So I was invited to leave Zaha after 5 years and to join as the director of this department and to create my own department of architects, obviously for me. And I decided to join. I was very skeptic, just like you, and I thought that this was going to be a trend until I saw who was laying the foundations for metaverse, and I thought, okay, we need to jump in, because otherwise we are just creating another social platform like our Twitter and our Facebook designed by graphic designers. So I thought, okay, let's lay this foundation. In 10 years, this will be superseded and old as hell, but at least I was part of the beginning. What is this kind of metaverse companies, in this case, Wilder World? Wilder World is a company with people from all around the world, 200 people, 150 when I joined. And everyone is working remotely. There's no headquarters, there's no base, there's no computer where people sit. We are working from all over the world, working all time. So when I go to bed, people in America are waking up. And the work is continuous every day. And metaverse companies don't just do cities, right? They are responsible for all of these cyber assets, of course. So you have wheels, you have kicks, you have cribs, all of these work as NFTs. And they have their own token. I'm not going to go through this, but this is basically the currency of blockchain. And what is the difference between these kind of companies and architect companies? They join creators from the best creators, in this case, from all over the world. So right now, you have one side designers, another side the developers, which in our normal days, they are the engineers, so like the boring people. There's a lot of constraints on the metaverse, believe it or not. And from the creators, they are gathering people who design Dune, from Nike, who designed Prey, who were from Marvel, who designed Matrix, who designed the League of Legends, who designed the Blade Runner, and now they have Zaha. So we are all at the same time creating together from completely different spaces, and we are 200 people. On the other side, on the boring side, you have the software engineers, so you have the game developers, the game directors, the shades artists, and the shade artists, it's more or less the people who add materials. And then, apart from the digital assets, they are creating a mega city. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I am the architect assigned to create the urban and the planning rules of the city. The city is the size of Miami. They call it Wyami. And all the buildings that you're looking at are designed from scratch, all of them. There are two design departments. One is what we call Era 2. It's something a little bit reminiscent from Cyberpunk, from Blade Runner. Actually, the director of this department is the designer of Blade Runner and Prey. And then there's another era, and that's my department, and that's called the Future Era. And this is where architect and design thinking comes in. So Future Era is basically gathers only architects. We all come from actually Zaha right now, because I feel confident to start with people I know. And we believe that architecture for a cyber environment should keep a foot on the real world, should prove reality, should prove hyperrealism, but it should bring fantasy, because there's no point on creating cyber environments that don't have fantasy. So we are bringing fantasy, I'm bringing dynamism, I'm bringing something that is very important for us, which is healing. I'm bringing the connection between nature and architects. I believe that if we had another chance on architecture, we would most likely give 50-50 nature, human built. And although this is not real nature, I made sure that this era develops on URL at the same time as develops at IRL in reality. So you do create nature in cyberspaces and simultaneously in physical spaces. And this whole world and all of this big YM is being designed by people who are architects, who are film designers, who are game designers, and we have exactly the same plot, urban plot. At the same time, when I joined a metaverse company, I realized that architects should jump in not just as designers, but we should bring some knowledge on how to get it, not in this case built, but how to put it in place in the same way that in architecture we know how to design, but we also need to know a bit of engineering. If you're designing for the metaverse, I believe that you have your whole game on your hands if you know also how the gameplay works. So I'm teaching both. I decided to teach to architectural students Maya designing, in this case fluid design, and I'm teaching the game development, which is Unreal, and I'm teaching both. On a studio that happened in the beginning of this year, it was a studio with 30 people, architects and students of architecture, from all around the world. I created an urban scenario. I split it in 10. I gave it to people who don't know each other, and then they spent 2 months designing and creating the game development of their design. As an architect, I think we also have this responsibility of questioning typologies. What is a museum in the virtual space? It should not be a copy and paste of our museums because it's not in real life. How do we watch performance? How do we watch a game in VR? For example, Google just bought exclusivity of NBA games. It's a $1 billion contract. And basically, Sandbox will be streaming all the NBA games on Metaverse. Only Sandbox, only Google. And how do you watch a game? How do you watch an NBA match? Do you have a seat? Do you want to be always on the front row? Should we do AR, so you're actually not playing on the field, but you are connected to an asset, to a machine that actually makes you play in augmented reality? And this is the kind of questions that I think we should start doing if we are being part of cyber environments. And this is one of the projects that I like the most from my students, because they question the meaning of stadium. They created this very interesting hologram in the center that streams the point of view of each player, and you can just change the streaming point of view. For example, this is from Unreal. Okay, obviously the design they started designing with this project, with Maya. But you see that the way you watch and the way you perceive games can be extremely revolutionized. And I think this is what we should do as architects. We should not copy a stadium in real life and have it in a virtual environment. Another project that I think it was the most important for me to start my second studio that I will be starting in a week. I'm going to rerun this whole studio again. It is that right now, as architects of the real environment, we don't do one thing that graphic designers do. We don't design user experience. So we don't design sound. We design light, but most of the times not even it's us designing light, it's a designer. And when you're creating a project in the cyber environment, you are responsible for sound, you are responsible for light, you are responsible for a lot more than what we are responsible in reality. So for example, these students, again, the design is very much from a student perspective, which is very forgiving. But the user experience, I don't think you can hear. They were extremely concerned about how does it sound like, what kind of mood is it, what kind of light is it, what kind of shaders are we using for the rendering. So this was a very immersive, I think this is exactly what I mean for immersive experience of spaces. And it's very interesting to see architects, and this group is actually architects from real life, testing designing experience in the virtual life. And this is exactly how I'm going to pick up from for the next studio. So I just like to say that bottom line is we are going forward to an immersive Web3 experience. Every brand wants a digital strategy. There's not a brand that don't come up to me and ask, how can I be part of the metaverse? I think all offices will hear this. Will hear their clients asking this weird question. And the reality is, for our future, metaverse is going to be almost kind of archaic. And we will test social interaction. We will do e-commerce 100%. We will do art. We'll do fashion. We'll do public and private sector. It's an investment of digital assets with no physical footprint. But in the future after that, the future where we are not going to be there, they are going to question what kind of social values were implemented on these Web3 old metaverse spaces. And we are going to be the ones who laid the foundation for those values. So in the same way that right now social interaction in our social arena, we know that it's not a plaza like our architects did, it's not a market, it's our screen, it's our Twitter, it's our social app, that's our social arena. And that was designed by graphic designers. And who is looking for social values? Graphic designers, from the customer point of view, from the user experience. And right now we are questioning, what kind of values are these? We are questioning Twitter, we are questioning Instagram. It was never thought. In the time that we're not going to be here, the social values that were built for Web3 immersive spaces are going to be asked as well. And it's up to us if this is going to be designed by a graphic designer again, a game designer again, or a film designer, or is the architect responsible for the next generation of spaces? Because we were the ones who learned how to create it. So I am in total belief that we are the ones who need to create the next ones. Otherwise, social interaction is going to be exactly the same as our 2D, but in 3D. So basically, I also like to say that this is not a train that passed. There's no FOMO. There's no fear of missing out. There's not like a boat that passed and we are not part. And most of you are not on the metaverse and you're like, oh, did I miss this? And we didn't miss. This is literally happening and starting. It's getting built now. And I think that's why I'm here and that's why I was invited to be here. I'm literally, from a colleague point of view, I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. This is how you can be part of it. You have very active, you have very passive. It hasn't passed yet, but it's happening. And I think it's just going to be a matter of how you want to participate in it. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mariana. That was amazing, very interesting.
Thank you so much.
Things to think about. And I think that is all the time we have for today. But are you hanging around here?
Yeah, of course.
Ask you some questions and things like that?
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you around outside here.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.